Thanks for having me, Riley.
So I have a lot of questions, but let's start with the words of Senator Sanders right there. What do you make of that?
Well, Democrats, if they really wanted to secure our border, have had an opportunity to do it for the last 4 years. Instead, they opted to have an open border. I represent a city that's just an hour's drive away from the border, and so we feel the effects of it. I've been to the border more than 6 times with the men and women of the National Border Patrol Council, and I've seen and watched as children are sold across the border every single day.
Yes.
You go down there, you wait for 8 or 10 minutes before you see people start to walk across. They're being extorted by the cartels. You know, I went with a delegation, and I was the only Republican, and it was all Democrats, and we were in a secured convoy going down to the consulate in Tijuana. And I asked a group of Democrats, I said, you know, it's just us here in the car. I said, explain to me why, if the President of the United States thinks it's the right thing to do to have an open border, why does he force these children to pay blood money to the cartels and be raped along the way? If he thinks it's the right thing, go to the Rose Garden, and Joe Biden should have advocated to the American people that opening the port of entry to those seeking asylum was the right thing to do. But he didn't want to be responsible for the flood of people, but he wanted credit with his party followers. It is absolutely immoral what Joe Biden did. What President Trump has done to secure the border almost even before being sworn in by announcing that we're going to have a lawful process, that was the right thing to do. And let me tell you, it does not get said enough. We offer a pathway to lawful permanent entry into our country to 1.8 million people every year, about 1.2 million on a pathway to ultimate permanent residency. That is more than all of the civilized nations on earth combined allow. We are the most generous nation when it comes to lawful immigration. Last thought, on Friday, I went to see a friend of mine who immigrated lawfully from Latvia. It took him almost 20 years to become a citizen, and I was proudly there, and I saw 98 new citizens, and I got to stand up and pledge allegiance to the United States flag in one of the most meaningful pledges. And I, as an elected official, I get to pledge allegiance sometimes 3 times a day at public meetings. But I never felt more meaning and more pride in pledging allegiance than when I did with 98 brand new Americans who had just pledged to throw off their allegiance to their former kings, princes, and potentates and to swear allegiance only to our flag.
I love to hear that. I mean, being an American, it's a very special thing, and people need to work for it. They have to do it our way or just not do it at all. And look, as for Senator Sanders saying, we just need comprehensive reform, whatever that means, there's no way to create a system where you can absorb 15 to 25 million people illegally in a few years. That's completely asinine. But on that note, I want to ask more about the impacts you've seen here in California. And since you're also running right now to be on the County Board of Supervisors here in San Diego County, I'd like to hear some of your thoughts about what we can do to keep the border secure and make sure what was going on in the last 4 years never happens again.
Well, you know, my predecessor, Jim Desmond, has done a great job bringing attention to the plight of border security here. We need leaders who will speak up on this issue. This is the central question. There are certain leaders who think it's not their lane to speak up on federal issues. I say those of us, especially leaders from the San Diego region, have a duty, a moral duty, to speak up, most of all for the immigrants who are being extorted, who are being raped, who are being sold into slavery. What we are seeing is a wave of crimes against humanity at our border. And we have not only allowed it, we have called it up. We have almost been the unwitting accomplices and business partners of the drug cartels as they have begun to make almost as much profit from the sale of human beings across our border as they do from illicit drugs. It's really morally abject. And the fundamental question, Riley, is, are we going to be a nation of laws?
Yes.
Are we going to abide by the lawful process? Are we going to have a way? I have a friend who immigrated legally from Iraq, and she wants so badly for her sister to be able to come and visit her. And she's been trying for 7 years and can't get her sister to come see her. She had life-threatening surgery and couldn't get her sister a visa to come visit. Every day, through my many years of work proudly with Congressman Darrell Issy here in the region, I get to meet immigrants and hear their stories. And they're the legal immigrants who have done it the right way. They'd like to have a family member visit. Maybe they want to have a family member be reunited with them, and they can't get it done. It takes decades, but they're doing it the right way. And I ask this, why do we treat and mistreat our lawful immigrants by a worse standard than we allow people to come here illegally. President Trump is finally reinstituting a lawful process, making sure people are being treated fairly and with humanity and dignity. And if our leaders aren't going to stand up for us at the local level, at the state level, who's going to speak up for us? We can't leave it all just to the White House. We need leadership at every level.
Absolutely. Now, one point I want to follow up with you here, John, as well, because there's this issue of not just illegal immigrants, but ones who specifically commit violent crimes against Americans. And Democrats across the country, in places like Massachusetts and California alike, have fought any effort to remove those people from this country. Now there are questions about whether or not said people are being put back on the streets in a place like Boston, where ICE says they are. I want to ask you, what is your plan for sort of making sure that we get around that Democrat opposition, specifically here in Southern California, where Democrats at the county board level have fought tooth and nail to protect the most violent people who come here illegally?
Well, that's right. As a candidate for the County Board of Supervisors, there's no issue more important than this one right now. We have passed a resolution at the County of San Diego that is totally wrong-minded, that allows protection of the worst convicted rapists, convicted murderers. It allows them to be shielded. When they passed SB 54, the sanctuary state law, which was a huge mistake in 2017-18, that did not provide protection to convicted child molesters, convicted rapists, and convicted murderers. Even the Democrats in Sacramento knew that was too far. And they allowed for those individuals to cooperate, for law enforcement to cooperate with federal law enforcement to remove those convicted of those serious felonies. But Democrats in San Diego went even further and said, no, we're going to provide protection to those. Now, in 2023, the sheriff did cooperate with ICE to deport 23 extreme serious felons convicted of murder, convicted of rape, convicted of child molestation, and we deported those individuals. Where will those individuals be returned? They'll be returned to the immigrant community that they had lived in and victimized. Remember, they're living in the immigrant communities. It's the immigrant communities that will be victimized. We are trying to protect those who have come here, who are following the laws, who are pursuing the American dream, from individuals who have come to victimize their communities.
Okay. Absolutely. I'm glad to hear where your mind is on that. I do want to pivot, though, as well, because we have just about a minute left on the clock. And there are other issues that San Diegans and Californians are facing alike, including the cost of living, overtaxation, and homelessness. So what are some of your plans to combat some of those issues?
Well, we have the funding already to solve homelessness. The question is whether we have the will. You know, I've been focusing a lot on the parable of the Good Samaritan. The first two, you know, the Jewish man who walked by, and then the Levite walked by the man who was laying in the gutter who needed help. And then the Samaritan came along and said, you know, this might be my enemy, but I'm going to pick him up. He was unconscious. The man picked him up and took him back to his home. We cannot continue to walk past people that are strung out, addicted on our streets and leave them in that condition. We must have the heart and the intellect to pick them up out of that circumstance and get them the treatment they need, whether they are well enough to understand that they would benefit from treatment or not.
Okay, absolutely. I completely agree. It's cruel, really it is, especially when you think that some of those people on the streets are veterans. Many of them here in San Diego are veterans, and that's just talk about a betrayal, truly. So final thoughts then for you, John, about your race and your campaign. Where can people go for more information about you and your platform?
Thanks, Riley. They can go to mayorfranklin.com to learn more and to support my effort. We need strong leaders. I'm fighting to balance our budget again. We've hired a 13% increase in county workers in the last 5 years, while county population has declined by 20,000 people. More people to serve fewer residents. Is there any surprise that we are now in a $138.5 million budget deficit? And now we have supervisors proposing a sales tax on our homes, called a transfer tax, and a new sales tax in order to balance the budget. We do not need to raise taxes to balance the budget. We need to reduce spending and right-size our county government.
Absolutely. Well said. And John, thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Riley.